So what? TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining me today is Nomiki Cohn and JR Jackson. What's up, guys?
It's the first time for us.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of crazy.
First time we've done the show together.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is. Because every time she comes in, something happens, and I'm not it.
I'm the replacement Anna. It's like two ethnic women to fill that slot.
I know. It's
Never can live up to it, though.
Oh, get out of here. By the way, I'm going to clear something up on air, which I probably should have done off air. But so I know your name's Nomiki, but people call you Nomi.
Yes.
You're okay with that?
I'm totally fine with that.
Okay, just making
much easier.
Okay, making sure. All right, cool. I like Nomiki though. Can I call you Nomiki?
You can call me that.
Okay.
I'm okay with it. There was a point in when I was in senior year, I was like, everyone's gonna call me by my real name because they invented the name Nomi, and I was done after that. It was never going away.
Yep.
Always Nomi. I didn't come up with it. Totally fine now.
But you're okay with it now.
I'm cool with it now.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
So cardinal rule to give yourself a nickname. So by the way, don't do it. So it's good that someone else gets it.
Yeah, my nickname in 5th grade was Mickey. I'm really happy with Nomi.
Nomi's good. Nomi's good. I like it. All right, guys. We have so many updates for you guys, including the GOP plan to cut taxes. They call it tax reform, but so far it doesn't seem like tax reform. So we'll get into some updates on that. And then later on in the show, we will also discuss Representative Scalise and his return to Capitol Hill. He has made it appears to be a full recovery. He's still going to physical therapy, but, some good news on that front as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, but, there's some stuff that you should be skeptical of. So we'll get to everything in just a minute. And remember, use the hashtag TYT Live to tweet to us during the show. We will read some of your tweets when we come back from our breaks. So, you guys ready?
Ready.
Let's do it. All right. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price has just announced that he plans on paying for the charter flights that he took on American taxpayers' dime. And of course, this is following a huge investigation that showed that he racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in these flights where he traveled to various locations for official business. But on some of those trips, he also went there for personal reasons as well. And so, understandably, as someone who considered himself, a fiscal hawk, a real fiscal conservative, he did get quite a bit of criticism and heat for the fact that he was taking these private jets, when in reality he could have just taken trains or commercial flights and saved U.S. taxpayers a considerable amount of money. Now, Tom Price's official statement in regard to this was that the taxpayers won't pay a dime for my seat on those planes. The announcement follows a political investigation finding that Price had taken at least 26 charter flights costing more than $400,000 since May. Now, there are some predicting that he won't pay that full cost. I'm predicting that he's hoping that this will kind of go away and maybe he won't pay anything. But that's just my speculation, so I want to be clear about that. But apparently after Donald Trump claimed that he might consider firing Tom Price over this, Tom Price decided that he would state that he'd pay for these flights. So, thoughts, guys?
It's part of that skinny budget.
Yeah.
Skinny budget, $400,000 for charter flights. I think listen, we don't need any more evidence, and I feel like we're just speaking to our own audience, but at a time when they're talking about the budget, when they're talking about tax cuts, it just doesn't look good, and I think that's why Donald Trump threw him under the bus. But the reality is, is Politico going to follow up? Are people going to be paying attention to whether or not he reimbursed that money? Does anybody know if Donald Trump ever gave money to the veterans like he said he would? This is part of their game, and it distracts away from the real stuff, which is this budget talk, and also paying attention to the Democrats, frankly. I think there's two sides of this. We have to pay attention to the real stuff happening, and, when there's an Instagram photo of Stephen Mnuchin's wife, hashtag Hermes, hashtag Louis Vuitton, that's a great piece that reinforced that this is a corporatocracy, and it's the 1% that's ruling Donald Trump's cabinet right now.
It's the swamp, right? It's the same swamp that Trump claimed that he would drain in D.C., and he's done the exact opposite. But I do want to just quickly mention that you're right. It certainly doesn't look good when Republicans are pushing for tax cuts, which of course would benefit the wealthy more than anyone else. But I also think that, Trump likes to bully people that don't accomplish his legislative goals. And during his Boy Scouts Jamboree speech, Trump said that, he jokingly said that he would fire Tom Price if he didn't do what was needed to pass the healthcare reform, right? The repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act. So I think it has maybe something to do with the flights, but in the grand scheme of things, Trump doesn't strike me as someone who really cares about something like that. I think he's just bitter that they lost again when it comes to the healthcare issue.
And actually, neither does Tom Price care about the real issue behind it. So when you see statements of regret or concern or apologies for what they've done and what they're going to do to I guess, repay their debts, in this case directly, you have to see what their wording is, because you wonder if they've actually learned a lesson. Again, I've said this before. I have a 5-year-old kid, and in TK last year, when there's a conflict, the teacher said, okay, if you apologize for something, what are you apologizing for? Do you know what you did to the person, and how are you going to fix it to make sure it doesn't happen again? None of that stuff is ever addressed in these statements by grown-ass men who are in positions of power. So all of my political career, he says, in as part of his statement, I fought for the taxpayers. It's clear to me that in this case, I was not sensitive enough to my concern for the taxpayers. So, Tom, did you forget, as you were sitting on the plane with your staff and you were doing the whole thing on the private jet, you go, I remember back in, was it 08, 06, when he was on shows talking about how he hates the outrageous spending by these Democrats. Yeah. So, are you forgetting? Did you forget? Do you not know what you're doing anymore?
He didn't forget.
Or do you just not care anymore? So, of course, you have to address that. And so you overlook it, so you don't say, well, I'm going to go back and think about where I've come from and what I'm going to do to remedy this situation. Not just pay it off. Because, again, we don't know if that's going to happen. But what are you going to do? How do we trust you again is the point.
Right. Look, I don't believe a single member of Congress is a so-called fiscal conservative, right? And by the way, this criticism extends to Democrats as well, because if you're genuinely concerned about, balancing the budget and running the government in a responsible economic way, then you wouldn't continuously support massive increases of funding toward the Defense Department so private contractors can get rich, right? And so, look, this $400,000 is shady, and Tom Price deserves the criticism he's getting, especially considering the fact that he's a massive hypocrite when it comes to this issue. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, the biggest amount of waste is not on entitlement programs. It's not on, the Affordable Care Act and helping expand Medicaid. It's really when we put money into the military. So, the Defense Department can spend $28 million on forest camo gear for Afghan soldiers when they're in a place where only 2% of their land is covered by forests, right? Like, that's the kind of shit that we shouldn't be spending our money on, okay? If you're a real fiscal conservative, you'd point to that, but they continuously increase the money toward the Pentagon, and it's crazy.
Our government is essentially a money funneling machine for contractors and consultants, right? Political parties are money funneling machines for the consultants, and contractors make all the money out of our budget. Right. And these are the same people. Let's not forget, these are the same people who put out those, and they go on like Fox Business, and they talk about, oh my God, the U.S. government spent $40,000 on researching shrimp on treadmills. I mean, that was literally in one of their reports. Yeah. They find these little things. That's their strategy. Look at all this waste over here, but ignore the waste over here.
Right. I love that you brought up, scientific studies and the government subsidizing or helping pay for some of those studies, because, they'll look at something like that, which has a purpose. On its face, a study like that might seem ridiculous, but it's usually, basic science studies that help us understand the world around us and help, in researching bigger things that actually do benefit society. Anyway, look, Republicans have been, trying to defund scientific programs for a long time. And at the same time, they'll go ahead and they'll increase funding for things that we don't need, which is a bloated defense budget that only benefits private contractors. So, look, I'm glad Tom Price is getting called out. I'm glad that the criticism is working to some extent. We'll see if he follows through on it, but I want Politico to follow through. I want them to make sure that he reimburses U.S. taxpayers for this money.
And again, as this article pointed out, that's the wording. I'm going to pay back from my seat. How many of the seats are on it? How much staff was used?
Exactly.
Flight fuel. Your seat wasn't the fuel. Your seat wasn't the staff. Your seat wasn't the food. Just your seat, which I don't know how much that could come out to.
It was chartered for him. And what would be really interesting is if any of our lovely viewers are great with tech, I would love to see a website that keeps track of all these promises. Because we're getting flooded with checking into draining the swamp, but it goes through one news cycle, who's following up, Who's making sure that the light keeps being shined on these folks?
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard because you're right. The news cycle it's just flooded every day, and it's so hard to keep up. But, we can't let them distract us. And I think that, some of Trump's tweets and some of his more juvenile behavior is done intentionally to distract us. So stay focused. All right, let's move on to updates in Puerto Rico. The Trump administration has gotten quite a bit of criticism for its handling of the relief efforts in Puerto Rico. Now, of course, Hurricane Maria has completely destroyed power and electricity in the island, and it has also led to people panicking about their access to clean drinking water, to food, to medical supplies. Some individuals have had to bury family members in their front yard because they have no access to services that would allow for a proper burial. Things are really bad. And so the response from the U.S. government toward the relief effort in Puerto Rico was very different from the response effort or the relief effort in Houston and in South Florida. And so I'm glad that the media has stayed on this story and continues to pressure the Trump administration to do something about it. And it appears that today the administration has done something. So let's start with the first thing. There was the Jones Act. The Jones Act would essentially force Puerto Rico to receive all of its materials and supplies for the relief effort from U.S. ships. And as a result, it's actually hindered the relief effort because of costs, because of logistical issues. And so politicians in Puerto Rico asked the Department of Homeland Security to please waive the Jones Act temporarily so they can get what they need for the relief effort. At first, the Trump administration seemed a little unwilling to do so. In fact, let's take a look at this video of Trump addressing that situation earlier.
Well, we're thinking about that, but we have a lot of shippers and a lot of people people that work in the shipping industry that don't want the Jones Act lifted, and we have a lot of ships out there right now.
Okay, so he just that's the thing. Trump's not tactful, right? Any other politician, any other president would find some sneaky way of making an excuse. But Trump's like, yeah, I mean, my cronies in the shipping industry really want to make money off of this terrible situation, and so I'm going to go ahead and listen to them.
Funny, while I was draining the swamp one day, one of the swamp creatures grabbed my leg and he totally scared me. So I was like, okay, you get what you want just this one time.
And by the way, Puerto Rico wasn't saying, no, you need to lift the Jones Act, repeal the Jones Act, which, by the way, was passed in the 1920s and has cost Puerto Rico a lot. They pay 40% more for their cars. They pay hundreds of millions of dollars more for imports from the mainland. So it's been pretty negative for the economy of Puerto Rico. And remember, they don't have the same bankruptcy protections that states in the U.S. have. And so, whatever, politicians in the island are saying, look, just temporarily waive it so we can get the materials we need and not pay an arm and a leg for it. And so finally, Trump and the Department of Homeland Security agreed. Sarah Huckabee Sanders released a tweet today saying that the President of the United States has authorized the Jones Act be waived for Puerto Rico. It will go into effect immediately. Now, real quick, before, it wasn't just liberals that were criticizing Trump for his response or lack thereof. There were some Republicans who also criticized him, John McCain being one of those Republicans. But Lieutenant General Russell Honore, who actually led the successful relief efforts at Hurricane Katrina following Trump's failed efforts, actually said something about what Trump has been doing or what he hasn't been doing. And I thought this was an incredibly strong statement. I wanted to share it with you guys. Let's take a look.
In response to that, General, the president seems concerned about the shipping industry.
I want to keep it clean. That's a crying damn shame. I knew since yesterday that big shots in Wall Street were making this call. And the president has shown again, you don't give a damn about poor people. You don't give a damn about people of color. And the SOB that rides around in Air Force One is denying services needed by the people of Puerto Rico. I hate to say it that way, but there's no other way to say it.
Wow. Remember when Kanye was criticized for that?
Yeah, in fact, we have the video that you're speaking of. Here's Kanye responding to Bush after his failed relief efforts after Hurricane Katrina. Take a look.
May end up being the most tragic loss of all. George Bush doesn't care about black people. Please call.
In the past few days,
Can we just watch that one more time? It's just the best video ever.
May end up being the most tragic loss of all. George Bush doesn't care about black people. Please call.
in the past few days,
Just start to stand in front of a refrigerator. Oh, it's so good. Every small aspect of that.
Mike Myers. Mike Myers, like it took a while to sink in. Anyway, that video is amazing. But yeah, it was definitely a Kanye moment, except it wasn't Kanye. It was, a lieutenant general who went in to New Orleans and actually, succeed. I don't want to say succeeded, because there's still a lot of devastation in parts of New Orleans that was damaged from the hurricane. But he actually did manage to succeed in some things, whereas Bush had very little response. And so it's interesting to hear from him now and hear what he has to say about another Republican president and his initial failure to really robustly address what's going on in Puerto Rico.
This always leads to other aspects of why people are concerned about things, like the way that Donald Trump took a couple days, or at least seemed a bit detached from his visit, even down after Irma hit, right? Or then when W flew over and just looked out of the window, that was a very now infamous picture. So what people generally need is not for the photo op opportunity, which Trump eventually did when he was carrying supplies into the back of a pickup truck because he's helping so much, but just so you can go and see what people are actually experiencing. People said the mayor of one of the cities in Puerto Rico is living in the same conditions that her citizens are. So she's understanding what they're going through. So when she talks to people about what's happening, she's not hearing it because someone told us, because she's living it. So she understands the level of devastation. So when a guy goes to visit, the reason you go visit is so you don't only care about the shipping guys in your swamp, but you care about the people that are there because you're like, man, I didn't know people were living like this. But you don't choose to go there because, And so now we can make these assumptions about how you feel about people of color, because you haven't given yourself a chance to actually care about them. You care about the people that you're closest to. We just know how that's how human nature is. And people don't care about gay people until they're in their family. Like, I have a gay cousin now, so now I care about his rights. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. And we had signs of this during his campaign. This is a man who, instead of working the Iowa caucus, which he lost, he swooped in on his jet, was outside of the caucus, gave a speech, and wanted everybody to come to him. So he has a history of not getting down on the ground with folks. Like, he's a germaphobe, but he doesn't like people. And when you're a politician who doesn't like people, it's these moments that really cost you the presidency. I mean, that was the turning point for George W. Bush.
Girl, I hope it cost him the presidency, right? Because I think it's taken a very long time for some of his voters, and I'm not talking about his base. His base is still pretty loyal to him. I'm talking about people who are like, I really don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton, so I'm going to vote for the other guy, right? So people who voted for him are now kind of thinking, wait, does he care about me? Because after he got elected, his response to criticisms over why he hasn't filled his cabinet with, average Americans was, I don't want poor people working for me. Right. I mean, what does that say to you as an American who voted for him out of, economic desperation? And so I think this is another example of that. But, I think you also have to consider, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, that a president going to, the storm-stricken parts of the country is also a little bit of a logistical nightmare, right? And so there have been politicians in Texas, in Florida. I haven't really heard about it in Puerto Rico, but in other states that have been devastated by hurricanes that have said, look, actually having the president here would be a nightmare. Right. So we're glad that he's not coming, right? And so that's the other side of it that I want to make sure that we represent. Sure. Real quick, here are the other relief efforts that have just been announced. Let's go to graphic 4. The more robust approach includes the deployment of the USNS Comfort, a hospital ship that has responded to other natural disasters. There are about 5,000 active duty U.S. service members and National Guardsmen on duty assisting in Puerto Rico. FEMA has also released details about the amount of aid provided to the islands thus far, including 4 million meals, 6 million liters of water, 70,000 tarps, and 15,000 rolls of roof sheeting. The agency has said that the federal personnel are aggressively working 24 hours, 7 days a week to restore power, communications, and port access. So the military is now heavily involved, and it seems as though the relief efforts are taken much more seriously. And so that's good news all around, and hopefully, people get the materials that they need, including fuel, gas, water. Fuel and gas is the same thing, I acknowledge that. Medical supplies. It's good to hear that there's at least somewhat of a positive update to this.
Let's not forget, though, in Trump's budget, they want to cut FEMA.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
Your neighborhood might be next. I mean, most likely will be next, because look what's happening in the South right now. Yeah.
All right, we got to take a break. Let's do that, and when we come back, some updates on the tax proposals from the GOP. Will the wealthy get tax cuts? Some are saying no. We'll give you the facts. I'm super excited because we have different levels of members. They pay $10 a month, but there are some members that pay a little more. Executive producers, for instance. My favorite thing about executive producers is that we have quarterly calls with them. I love that I'm getting a little transparency and I'm knowing what you guys like and dislike, ideas on how to improve the show, topics that maybe we haven't heard of yet you really want us to cover. We have so much respect for you because of the fact that you keep us independent and allow us to be uncensored, unfiltered, without worrying about corporate sponsors breathing down our necks and telling us what we can and can't say. So if you want to be a member, obviously no pressure. You can go ahead and join by going to tytnetwork.com/join. I'm going to ask some uncomfortable questions. The first topic that I said that we would discuss a little more is masturbation.
And then I was swimming in a hazelnut river.
Are you sure you're not doing mushrooms? Oh my God, I can achieve an orgasm by myself.
Fuck that, I am going to talk about it, because there should be no shame. I think a lot about that, because I love life.
That openness led to amazing.
And I keep saying to everybody, I gotta go call my wife. I figured that was a good excuse if people can't say, hey, don't call your wife.
I don't know how these works.
It's so weird because at that moment I felt this and it smelled like lavender.
At the end, you get to go check. Nice job. If you're a member of the young person, you too will rock the world.
And honestly, like, yeah, he's up to this. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
The Democrats that most of the state, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda. Most of the people are either unemployed, underemployed, or fucked.
This is why you lost the Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you?
And whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this. The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels. Do not freak out.
Easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
You said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
Hey guys, welcome back to TYT. A few TYT lies for you before we get started on the tax cut story. First, JR mentioned a tweet by who?
I gotta get back to it. Corinne Ryan.
Okay, so Corinne Ryan wanted to know what the 222 means. So it's basically the Armenian version of knock on wood, right? Okay. But when you say 222, it means you're like spitting.
We do the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And you go with the babies, like if do you have the baby thing where if you have a very cute baby, it's also to prevent jealousy.
Well,
it's a very strange
what you do with that is you put like an evil eye on the baby. The blue evil eye, and that's it. Look at you.
Do I have mine on? I usually do. Especially if I go on TV, because you never know.
So I'm not. It's funny.
I thought there was like a Greek thing, right?
It's a lot of different. Yeah, a lot of different countries believe in the evil eye thing. Yeah, on my wedding day, one of my bridesmaids pinned the evil eye on my garter belt. Yeah. Anyway,
something blue.
Yeah, exactly.
The evil eye.
All right. So Edward says they are keeping track of politicians' promises. PolitiFact has Republicans lying 3 times more often than Democrats. Republicans deny that, though. LOL. Yeah, I know. That's true.
That's fake news.
Yeah.
PolitiFact.
PolitiFact is great. It really is.
Yeah. Over a lot of things.
And then also Claire says, I thought I couldn't love Nomiki Konst more, but then she wears a Corbyn t-shirt. Dang.
I just came from, I was in Brighton for the Labor Conference, just got in yesterday. We'll talk about that more tomorrow with some reporting on TYT Politics. Stay tuned. All the interviews are going up. Got to give a shout out to TYT Politics.
All right.
There was an update from what we did mention. The Dow, he or she tweeted that Price, this is a Hill article, Tom Price, is apparently going to pay $52,000 of the estimated $400,000 of the travel cost.
Oh, just that.
Okay,
so makes that in an hour, or did make that in an hour.
That's insane. All right.
During that flight, one of the flights.
Really.
So a representative for Tom Price indicates that he will only pay $52,000 of the $400,000 that he has racked up from the private jet travel, which is unsurprising. I think we hit the nail on the head when we just suspected that he wouldn't pay the full amount. To be fair, didn't think he was going to pay any of it.
An eighth of it, about just over an eighth of the cost.
And who's the charter company? Like, which one of their cronies?
Yeah.
Kickbacks everywhere. You gotta look.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, let's get to tax cuts. Gary Cohn, who is, of course, Donald Trump's economic advisor and also the National Economic Council director, is now making his rounds in the media supporting tax cuts. He claims tax cuts for the middle class, but if you read the proposal as it is so far, it's tax cuts for pretty much everyone except for the lowest earners in America, who at the moment pay 10% in taxes, but would end up paying 12% in taxes should this proposal get passed by Congress. Now, Gary Cohn is an interesting fellow. He used to be the president of Goldman Sachs. He is the epitome of the swamp. Okay, he still has swamp slime all over his body as he's doing these press interviews. So let's listen to him talk to Stephanopoulos about, what's Stephanopoulos' first name again? George. Yeah,
good
that's
Greek
right.
man.
Yeah.
Evil eye was attached to his name.
So let's take a look at Gary Cohn and his explanation of these tax cuts to George Stephanopoulos.
Can you tell middle-class families watching right now, say a family of 4 earning $55,000, how much they will save under the president's plan?
Look, our tax plan is purely aimed at middle-class families. A typical family of 4 earning $55,000 in America today is going to have a substantial tax decrease.
Here in the state of New York, the top tax official here in the city of New York says that nearly half of the middle-class families earning between $50,000 and $75,000 are actually going to get a tax increase here in New York City because you eliminate the deduction of state and local taxes.
Well, George, if you look at the reality of the country as a whole, less than 25% of the families in America itemize. So we're solving for the country as a whole. So only the people that itemize today, which are less than 25% of the families in America today, itemize. So they're the only ones that are actually taking a deduction for their state and local taxes. We're solving for the greater good of the country. But what you have to look at is you have to look at what we did in its entirety. You have to look at this plan in its entirety.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, you can't guarantee that no middle-class family will get a tax increase. There will be middle-class families who get a tax increase under your plan, correct?
George, there's an exception to every rule.
So that's a yes.
So look, I can't guarantee anything. You could always find a unique family somewhere.
Okay, so as I mentioned on yesterday's show when we initially covered this tax proposal, there are so many details that still need to be sussed out. So that includes what they plan on doing with corporate tax loopholes. Which corporate tax loopholes are they going to do away with? But in regard to middle-class families and the question of whether or not some middle-class families would end up paying more in taxes, there is a huge possibility that that will happen. So just to give you the numbers, when it comes to the total percentage of Americans who do deduct state and local taxes, it's about 30% of Americans, 29.3% to be absolutely specific. That's according to the Tax Policy Center. Now, that includes rich people and middle-class families as well, to be fair. But you also have to keep in mind that the states that tend to have higher state taxes are usually blue states, right? So California is at the top of that list. Oregon is also at the top of that list. And so these are individuals who do deduct, when they file for their taxes because it does make a difference. And so if they get rid of that, okay, you want to get rid of that deduction, what are you going to do when it comes to these corporations? Because you haven't been specific about that. You haven't been specific about what you would do to the the richest people and how they take advantage of these loopholes. Now, another thing that I wanted to quickly mention is that, Cohn claims, no, it's not a tax cut for the wealthy, except it is, and I'll tell you why. So let's go to graphic 8. The Trump plan would lower the top tax rate from 39.6% to 35%, though it also leaves open the possibility of a higher rate for the super wealthy. The possibility. So let me get this straight. Oh, we're going to leave it up to Congress, which is as corrupt as it could possibly be with the legalized bribery we have in the country. We're going to leave it up to them, and they could possibly add one more bracket for the highest income earners in the country. No, that's not going to happen. I'm not even being pessimistic. I'm being realistic. We all know what the truth is.
Won't try and won't go for this extra super high tax rate that'll affect most of them and their families.
And the estate tax?
The estate tax. Okay.
That actually is spelled out, that they're planning to eliminate the estate tax. Shocker.
Yeah. So they want to do away with the estate tax. And who would that benefit? Would it possibly benefit Donald Trump and his family? Yeah, I think so. So let's go to the next video where Cohn addresses that a little bit.
The president has also said that wealthy will not get a tax cut under the plan. He says that he himself will not get a tax cut under the plan, or his family won't get one. He said that you won't get one as well. But look at the front page of USA Today right now. It says that Trump could reap millions from his own tax plan.
You've got to look at the plan in its entirety.
I am looking at the
We also put the ability for Congress to put a fourth tax rate in place, a fourth tax rate on wealthy Americans, very high earners. If we need to take more money from high earners and transfer it to middle-class Americans to make sure that middle-class Americans are getting a tax cut, we've given Congress the ability to do that.
He says, believe me, I won't be getting a tax cut. Can you guarantee that President Trump won't get a tax cut under this plan?
George, when we looked at the tax plan and we look what it does for Americans, we are very confident that Americans are getting a great deal here. We have also said that wealthy Americans are not getting a tax cut.
Will the wealthy get a tax cut or not?
The wealthy are not getting a tax cut under our plan.
That's not the evidence that's out there so far, but of course there are a lot of details yet to come, as you've pointed out.
Oh, look at George.
Yeah, the way that I read several things about how this can work is the way that they point out they want to have regular Americans put their taxes on a postcard and do both sides and turn it in.
So
they've been talking about that for
just like that.
over a decade, right? Probably even longer than I was even ever paying attention to anything. So the way they want to do it is that way, but that doesn't eliminate people with all kinds of means and tax attorneys from making it still pages full of a tax return document that allows you to get around all of these tax plans that you have that you guarantee isn't going to allow rich people to go around it, but it will. So directly for Donald Trump, the one particular one that stood out, I'm not going to go through all of them, but one that stood out was the preferential income tax rate for pass-through corporations, which there are 500 underneath the Trump brand. So it allows people that have parts and hands into this corporation to say, well, it's like a personal income for me, so it's not really a business, these small business owners. It's not my business, but it's actually my personal income. Then I can take it at 25% rather than the 39.6 that it would be at, and so it allows them to do whatever they want to move money around. Now, if you're that four-person family that makes $50,000 a year, which is not middle class, but
which is poverty. Let's be very clear. That's poverty.
Yeah, I mean, think about just, you're talking about kids. Say you have 2 kids, and you have school, preschool, and then maybe just normal expenses like that. It's gone. This is $50,000 to $55,000. Just gross. Without being taxed every day. Because, you don't go to the grocery store and they say, hey, so I see you got this much taken out of your taxes every month. The cost of this bread is going to be cheaper. Anyway, I got sidetracked. So they'll end up paying that much less to go around it. They can pay for these tax attorneys to do all this stuff. You have no recourse to do it if you're just a regular person that makes this little to nothing every year.
H&R Block ain't going to do it for you.
Right. It's not. Look, based on the proposal, they're very specific when it comes to the cuts. Like, that's the one thing that they are specific on. So they do plan on, as you mentioned, Nomiki, getting rid of the estate tax. That is a tax cut. They have limited the number of tax brackets in their proposal where there's only, 3. And so what do you think happens to the highest earners? Their taxes come down. It's flat out what's going on. It's right in front of us, right? And he has the audacity to go on television and pretend as though, no, me and my cronies don't stand to earn anything from this or gain anything from this. Please.
Because let's keep it real. It is. It's a pain in the ass to look through all this, look at the details of how it all works. And then, so the people that do, the researchers or these detached corporations, or not corporations, or investigators on this, and in this case, George Stephanopoulos, who is probably telling the story of what he's been told already, how these things work. And then after they say it, they go, oh, that's so complicated. People at home can sit and listen and go, that sounds like that's a pretty bad plan. But then the response, all it has to be is, they're lying to you, fake news.
Right. And that goes back to 1991, right before the 92 elections. Read my lips, no new taxes, that was thrown into the face of George Bush, arguably cost him the election, to Bill Clinton, who's all about the economy stupid. So as we come into 2020, if this tax plan is not, played out as fake news, which I don't actually think is going to affect the majority of Republican voters, I think that is why the Democrats need to have a clear spokesperson, a clear leader who has an alternative economic message that keeps it about the 1% and the tax havens and all the stuff that they're doing to manipulate the system so that the middle class, which barely exists now, is bearing the burden.
Right. My concern is that Democrats, for the most part, with the exception of, people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, will play ball. Because, and here's another thing to keep in mind, guys. It's Democrats in office are not poor, right? They're making some pretty good money. And so they also stand to benefit from tax cuts. Also, people who host these cable news shows get criticism for their incredibly superficial coverage of stories like this. But you think that's an accident? They have multi-million-dollar contracts. They love it. They love it. Which is why I give George Stephanopoulos some credit for, going after Cohn the way he did in that interview, because you don't see that type of follow-up in any other interview. You just don't in mainstream media. So these are all things to keep in mind. I think what's important is for Americans to pay attention to what hasn't been specified so far, and keep in mind that it hasn't been specified for a reason. Why is it that they haven't detailed, to a great extent, the type of corporate tax loopholes they plan on doing away with? Remember, when it comes to corporations, they want to lower the tax rate from 35% to 20%, which, by the way, right now the effective tax rate is 18.7%. And so, all right, you want to increase the effective tax rate to 20% and do away with the loopholes? Maybe I'm having a conversation, but that is not what they're doing. At least that's not how it appears at the moment.
So what I'm predicting is that Donald Trump's way of selling this, because there will be a lot of pressure on him about this issue, about draining the swamp and making it so that the 1% gets a fair share tax. He's going to talk about bringing jobs back. If you want to bring jobs back, you want those corporations to not use those tax havens and go overseas, which actually isn't as many as we think, then we've got to make sure that they have an incentive. And that is the scheme. That is the Republican scheme there. And we have to pay attention to that because, number one, it's not as many corporations as we think.
Well, yes, and also Cohn was asked about that today, and interestingly enough, he said something about, because a reporter challenged him in a way that I think was brilliant. Oftentimes these tax cuts are used by these corporate executives to buy stock, to increase their stock value, to do acquisitions. They consolidate, which means that they'll merge with another company and then lay a bunch of people off. So it's actually counterproductive. People lose jobs as a result of these tax cuts. And his response was, no, but then they'll reinvest it into the stock markets and they'll help small businesses. Some BS answer, but that is not what happens. They don't look to stimulate the economy. They look to stimulate themselves and their own corporation.
It's amazing. There was also one last piece of this that I've been reading. Their lobbyists for these large corporations will give tens of millions of dollars. We already know this, to politicians to do their bidding already. So then, which one is it? Is it that they're so broke that they can't afford any of these taxes that they keep getting chopped down with? Or is it they can spend $52 million to lobby politicians to do their bidding? If they had that money just throw away to bring back, I think they might have it to actually reinvest into America and bring it. So, by the way, also they're still also arguing to not give anyone a raise. So these minimum wage fights. Which one is it? Like you keep telling us these fairy tales, but then as soon as the actual policies are up for debate, they go, "Oh, who needs minimum wage increases from $6 an hour? Calm down. I thought you're hiring people. Where's the evidence?"
Right. Exactly.
I wonder when they're going to make it a tax write-off to pay lobbyists.
Oh my God! Please don't give them ideas. Although I probably already have.
I'm sure they're on that. I'm sure.
All right. Let's move on to healthcare. Healthcare debates in the United States primarily center on the issue of the Affordable Care Act, possibly repealing it or replacing it with a GOP plan. However, there is a forgotten program that is about to expire in funding that is important for you to know about. It is known as the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP to shorten it. And the funding for this program, unfortunately, expires on Saturday, September 30th. Now, Republicans have been so hell-bent on repealing the Affordable Care Act that they haven't worked on this particular issue. And so as a result, it seems unlikely that Senate Republicans will do what's necessary to ensure that this program remains funded. Now, to give you an idea of what this is, CHIP is a health insurance program created in the 1990s to piggyback on Medicaid, and it provides coverage for kids and families with higher, though still lower middle class to middle class incomes. The program also helps cover pregnant women in some states. It's designed much like Medicaid, with states and the federal government both paying a share of its budget. Now, the federal government pays about 3/4, I believe, of this program, and then states also go in there with their own funding to help create a robust program to make sure that these kids are insured. But if this funding expires, there are several states that could really suffer immediately. Now, some states have budgeted the money, so they'll be able to fund it for a couple months after the funding expires, but it is a little bit of an issue. So let's go to graphic 11. At least 3 states, Arizona, Minnesota, and North Carolina, plus the District of Columbia, would run out of funding by December. So they have a couple of months left in terms of money that they've budgeted for their program. However, Arizona appears to be in the most dire situation. Minnesota is in the most dire situation. They will run out of money immediately. So it's a block grant that gets renewed every 2 years, I believe. And so they can budget it out through those 2 years however they want. And some states obviously budgeted so it would last a little longer. Minnesota is not the case. So this is an important program, and there were Republicans and Democrats in the House that took some action to make sure that this remains funded. However, the Senate seems unlikely to do anything about it.
This goes to, so the fight is now about how it's going to be, I guess, funded, approached, how they can put this on the floor. There's been other think there was an amendment, or at least a bill put forward, but they're worried about it without being taken down with all these extra amendments that can come from anywhere else. And again, a lot of people don't know that's how it works as well too. Things get tossed on the bills all the time that have nothing to do with it. Mention it, but you forget. It's the normal daily approach to how they do business there. And many people are afraid to put things up like this that may actually solve this problem because it's going to cause other problems. So it comes back to messaging. So if you message this as, oh, this is a pro-life party, where is the life of these children? When does it come into play for you? Do you care? Call the people out by name and say they're champions of life.
Yep.
This kid's about to die.
And that's exactly it. You have the Christian Coalition who came in the early 80s, advocated on a moral economy, which of course benefited the 1%, and you have the most vulnerable people, whether it's disabled people coming into Congress and advocating to save the ACA while they're being, pulled away by security. What are the kids going to show up? Kids who are attached to respirators? This is what it's come to.
And also, keep in mind that, yes, there are kids who might be stricken with a serious illness, but then there's also the need for preventative care to prevent a serious illness among kids. Look, I didn't know it at the time because I was a kid, but I'm an example of someone who benefited from this program. In California, it was called Healthy Families. I don't know if they've renamed it since, but we grew up poor, right? Like my family, my dad was in severe debt. He lost his job when my brother was born. We could not afford health care. And so because of Healthy Families, I was able to visit the doctor when I needed to see a doctor. I was able to get, dental cleaning. Yeah, exactly. So I was healthy, luckily. But there are kids who have all sorts of serious illnesses who need this program. And to know that it's going to be snatched away from them because Senate Republicans were so hell-bent on the Affordable Care Act, they didn't really care too much about this issue. It's just so maddening. So maddening.
That's why we need Medicare for all. I mean, this just further proves that point. Because even with single payer is the way, even under the other Democrats' proposals that are out there that they're using to compete, it still doesn't protect from things like this. Because, okay, so you want to push forward another program, Chris Murphy, then what are you going to do when the Republicans come out and go after this program? So when you have Medicare for all, Republicans can't play these little games where they pick and choose a program to go and champion against and attach it to another bill or detach it from a bill. That's why Medicare for all works. And it prevents people from being on other forms of government assistance, frankly.
Yeah.
You're protecting every single aspect of insurance. Protecting the most vulnerable.
Absolutely. So Senators Orrin Hatch and Ron Wyden, so Orrin Hatch, obviously Republican, Ron Wyden, a Democrat, announced an outline of a deal to keep this program funded. They announced this several weeks ago. But to JR's point, there's a fear to propose something similar to this on the Senate floor because of amendments, because lawmakers want to tack on other things that would actually be negative for the very same people who would benefit from this program. And so, as we know, they want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They want to, if they don't repeal it, they want to at least get rid of anything that gives it, any type of power, any type of effectiveness. And so, Democrats are a little afraid to propose it, but to just be a leader, be a fighter, and I would go on a national tour if I was in Congress, and I would make a big statement of this, and I would not stop talking about it. Let's go Republicans play ball. And that's what Republicans would do. They're incredibly strong when it comes to campaigning and getting what they want. They're good at being bullies in some ways. And unfortunately, I don't see the same behavior on the Democratic side.
Some of them will, and some of them will be worried about getting reelected and receiving that money.
Yeah. All right, guys, we got to take one more break. When we come back, we will hear from Representative Scalise, who has made his return to Bethlehem.
Oh, good! Watch it here. Oh, man, that was slick. They go at it. Road Dogg lowers the boom. Beautiful move there by the Road Dogg, Jesse James. Yeah, he Dog's in trouble now.
Today is truly a historic day with the Supreme Court decision that makes same-sex marriage legal nationwide.
So this is one of those days in American history.
Road Dog can't shake the cobwebs out. He's on a comeback trail. Road Dog tags out. The Rock makes the tag.
It's to give you perspectives, right? So you can get
We need to change our mentality and understand that these people are trying to leave their own countries and everything that they've known, everything that they've built. It's not to come here and harm you.
Anytime someone's standing in Arizona carrying their paper, it's to remind them every day that they do not belong in this
PA, Billy Gunn, put the momentum here. You think? It's easy when you're good.
You see history repeating itself?
It's out here to prove a point. Then you have to.
And your best rhetoric translates to violence. If you don't get that, you're either in denial. No, it's true, and you just don't.
Hard showing a great deal of tenacity here. Badass Billy Gunn standing there, dazed.
horrible conditions where some of them would die. That's not what the Statue of Liberty says.
They hit him so hard, I heard anything else. I would have thought this. Hard, it's not fair too well here. That's so fast, McMahon. Let's see what happens. He bought himself a little time. The Nugget is helpless. Get out, get out.
This point in Syria.
Painful delivery.
Saying no to Syrian victims, I don't know. It makes me incredibly emotional and incredibly angry because I think it goes against what this country is.
What is this? American dream. And it shouldn't be forced to live in American night.
Nice move there by Mr. Edge. Nicely done. This crowd is electric. Everyone's up. Needs all the help he can get, Shane. Billy Gunn doesn't know where he is. Close quarters. Good night. Golden State. Oh, yeah. The Nugget is the man. That'll take the toughness right out of you. Billy Gunn, that was the tag. Check out this crowd. They're on their feet. There's no accounting for taste, Shane. Yes. Billy, tie up. Shake. Hurry, get up. BA, Billy Gunn, seeing so hard. Man, this action is hot. He put the smack down. Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, yes. Locking horns. Smart move there. Oh, he's staggering around. He's just a target now. Let's move over there, my Billy Gunn. Road Dog's on Dream Street. There's the tag. I don't get it. What's up with these fans? The Nugget is a real fan favorite. Oh, yeah. Let's go. It's trouble now.
Welcome back to TYT. All right, a few housekeeping things that I have to do. I shouldn't say that I have to do them. I do them because I want to do them, okay? All right, so announcements. Members, you guys help keep us independent. You power the show. Without you, we literally could not do what we're doing right now. And so we do member shout-outs for good reason. We want to show you how much we love you, and we want to thank you for all of your help. Today's members are Paul Gilbert and Sharon Ritchie. Thank you for being members. And for those of you who are not members and would like to join, you get post-game every day, Monday through Friday, and other perks including access to archives of the show. So if you can't catch us live, you can watch us whenever you want. Podcast us if you'd like. You can become a member by going to tytnetwork.com/join. Also, members only post-game will be live today, all right, after the second hour of the show. And
he's taking off.
Dave Kohler does stuff. I don't know why it's on my page. Reporting in with Dave Kohler, new episode available. Dave Kohler interviews Michael Tracy about his work for TYT Politics. Look for reporting in under member content on TYT Network.
I want to know the way Dave Kohler is.
Dude, like, first of all, Dave Kohler is a national treasure. And if you don't know that yet, you need to figure it out. And there's like so much going on in this company that I'm like, wait, there's a new show.
I'm reporting in.
Yeah, reporting in. It sounds great.
One day it was fun.
Yeah. All right, and then finally, TYT Lies. There was a TYT Live that I think you will enjoy, Monique. You can relate. Turk writes in and says, Gary Cohn should just shut up and go back to Shark Tank. What do you mean it's a different guy?
Okay, so during the break, I said, hi, looks like that guy from Shark Tank. His name is Mr. Wonderful. Definitely. Weird, Sean, not my type. I don't understand it. It's really creepy. But he's Canadian, we learned. So he's for Medicare for all. He's French Canadian, which means his baby's French. So he's like, he's not Gary Cohn.
As long as he's not Gary Cohn, he can't be that bad.
He just plays the bad guy on TVs with what I'm hoping for. Weird character.
I don't know who he is. I've never watched Shark Tank before.
I'm probably investigating this guy.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird.
All right, let's move on to some other news stories. Representative Steve Scalise has returned back to Capitol Hill, and he is luckily recovering from the shooting that did threaten his life. He has opened up about some of the injuries that he sustained as a result of a shooter who showed up during a baseball practice and opened fire. Now, the shooter has died. Someone opened fire against him on the scene, and he was killed immediately. Now, Steve Scalise, obviously, as you can see in that video, is still suffering from the injuries, but luckily he is not only surviving, he seems to be thriving based on the way he has spoken to the press about these incidents. So let's take a look at the first video where he talks about God and his role in saving.
When I was laying on the battlefield, the first thing I did once I was down and I couldn't move anymore is I just started running.
Nights don't come with
And
instructions, big man.
It gave me an unbelievable sense of calm, knowing that at that point it was in God's hands. But I prayed for very specific things. And I will tell you, pretty much every one of those prayers was answered. And there were some pretty challenging prayers I was putting in God's hands. But he really did deliver for me and my family. And it just gives you that renewed faith and understanding that the power of prayer is something that you just cannot underestimate.
Perfectly executed.
So I'm definitely a living example that miracles really do happen. The first place I want to go to thank true angels
Mark Henry to see
along the way.
Get up!
Starts with the United States Capitol Police.
Okay, so you guys,
It's
Road dog can't shake the cobwebs off. Got him down? Can't go.
I mean,
right?
you shot the head in the waist area.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work there. So all that had to be, we'll see soon, pieced back together. It's just the one thing you always hope there's something again. I went to when we first started this story with Tom Price and his apology for his expenses. I just
was the road dog. Now on the comeback.
There doesn't have to be this viciousness of, oh man, yeah, he's doing all this stuff. They come sure something directed to us spaces. I just wish he would understand he's not the first person to get shot. And when he was lying on that ball field and he almost died, he was praying to God. There's people who were lying on the ground praying to God for days survived too, and it didn't work out. And they didn't have capital police next to them to defend and take out
They didn't have government health care.
right. And then so suddenly this is an important thing because your family would have missed you. There's a lot of family members that miss their
And this crowd is all fucked up. Bunch of morons.
not all be 100% done, but there's something in the existing population that make it easier for people to be killed by in a country that's divided to the degree we are now. This got targeted specifically with Republican congressmen because they were who they were and where they would be. So if one of the things
that's so fresh now.
Anger for certain people and
Road dog.
so certain people that get targeted in our society, they're just as important as you are. Trust me, they have the same organs you got. They deserve to still stay just as important. I wish they would understand.
I'm going to take it a little bit further. I'm glad you brought this human aspect to the story because, you know, with great power comes great responsibility.
It'll take it right out of you.
If we go through this fight over or if they go to another place of Obamacare again, those who have been affected by gun violence and who have lost members of their families or who have not been able to pay for their health care because of shooters, I urge you to go to Representative Scalise's office and make that very vocal and using technology, making sure that message gets out there. Because he does have a responsibility and he's asking for what happened to him, and I hope that never happens to anybody else in office again. Yeah. But you are still an elected official, and now you have a personal story, and it's not just about the police who are there with weapons, because I know where that message turns, right? I think it's a good thing that there was a good guy there with weapons, right? This is about two things: guns, and people who should not be holding guns and purchasing guns.
I agree to some extent on everything you guys have said. Obviously there's the gun debate, and that is probably the most difficult thing to America because we are incredibly divided when it comes to that issue. And I've been clear about the fact that I'm not a proponent of banning guns. I think that responsible Americans should have access to guns. I do think that there's an issue with the lobbying like the NRA getting its funding from weapons manufacturers who want to turn a profit. They want to profit as much as possible, so they want to put as many guns in the hands of as many people as possible. Now, that's one issue, and I think Scalise should absolutely, at least have some empathy for the other side of the gun debate. But he should also have empathy in regard to individuals who don't have health care, who wouldn't have the same type of quality treatment that he received and that allowed him to survive. And so that's the issue that comes up over and over again. The word that I bring up when it comes to a wide variety of stories that we hear, just the lack of empathy. And you see it among politicians, you see it among Americans, and you would think and you would hope that if someone goes through something as incredibly tragic as what Scalise has gone through, they would learn from it. He would learn from it and realize, oh my God, had I not had this government health care. Again, it's government taxpayer-funded health care that these elected officials get to take advantage of. Had he not had that, who knows what would have ended up happening, right? And then the final thing is,
there's the tag.
Rhetoric. Because I think rhetoric does matter. We are divided. And the type of rhetoric that we're seeing among elected officials right now is unprecedented. And, the fish rots from the head down. We have Donald Trump, saying all sorts of incredibly disrespectful things during his campaign. Yeah, during his campaign, promoted violence, talking about punching people in the face. Reporters, right. And so, and by the way, violent rhetoric on both sides, it needs to stop. 100%, okay? Don't incite people to violence. Don't, needlessly overly demonize people to the point where someone who might be mentally unstable might take action against someone that you're talking about. We need to really take a step back, cool our tempers for a second, and think about how we can engage in political discourse in a civil way. And I think that's another thing that we can learn from this. So I'm glad he's making a recovery. We'll see if, it's been a learning experience for him. But he is happy to be back on Capitol Hill. He seems to really love his job.
Just see what happens. I mean, I would love my job too if I were congressman. They don't get anything done. They get paid a lot. Great health care.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching Hour 1. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Grace Baldwin joins us for
Oh, you get in there and wrestle, Kane. There's the knockdown. Nice move there, bud. X-Pac. Tangled up.
I was watching a documentary of the Vietnam War.
X-Pac is dazed. Kick him. Kick him.
In the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam, on TV, burning the Vietnam. And it didn't crash. That was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Look at that kid. That's the results, kid. Surprise, surprise. But you said X-Pac should have known better. Oh, yeah. He makes the tag. Better. Somebody. Just like that. You got him down? Kick him. 1, 2, 3. These fans are going through the roof. They're in the wrong line. Good boy.
As a cat, I'm moving away from the controversial stuff we were discussing prior to this live to talk about pussy. It's a pussy cat.
Here's the thing. I think the kid's ears. His ears. Everyone thinks the cats are smart because they found a way to just not care about
Just
it.
like that. Get him down.
But cats are stupid. They're like children. Like cats, everything they do is like, cat, I want to take a bath right now. Yeah, it's fucking gross. And they're like babies and like toddlers. We're like, no, this is how I do it.
Yeah.
I just lick it. And you're like, are you sure that's a good idea? Because I think you might get hair caught.
And here they go.
No, that's fine.
Triple H is about as effective as his ass kicking.
And then like, and they're just like babies where it's like, I pooped, and then it's like, you want to poop? It's like, no, I pooped here. It's fine.
Elo has as much future as
They're
an
idiots. They're like children. And then dogs are like husbands and sitcoms. Where they're just like, listen,
These fans are gonna blow the top off this arena. So now I can hardly hear you, see?
That's not true. Although Charlie never tries to help me. Always tries to help Christian.
Did you see that?
No. I just think it's interesting because I think Charlie might be a gay dog, and I love him no matter what.
Ready for this match to end? Let's get it on. Balance, Mark. They tie up. Ow! Out! D'Lo Brown with the tag. Jockeying for position. 1, 2. The crowd is pumped up. They are jacked. Triple H needs a jump start.
Hey guys, welcome back. Hey everybody. Hello. Hey, look, this is a different panel now.
Finally, Grace is back. Jeezy, crazy, Mister.
I was here yesterday.
Oh, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was at Disneyland buying the shirt I changed out of because it's not formal enough.
Fair.
Oh.
We both changed out actually of our casual wear to be on the show with everyone this evening.
For our radio audience.
This is your formal wear.
Yeah, this is it's going to be a bleak wedding, Anna. Let me tell you, this is my formal wear.
Yeah, I took the hat off. I put there's goo in the bathroom for your hair, but yeah, it just sometimes will be a chunk. So there was a giant chunk of purple goo hidden down in the roots of my hair on this side.
Fun.
It's creepy. Don't put your hand in the
Kind of an
get it
Easter
back.
egg for the viewers.
I was thinking ahead of time, should I change out of my shirt because Grace is in a shirt in that time. I'm glad I did because I changed out of a t-shirt into an actual button down, so it worked out. I didn't want to leave you hanging because you always look so nice.
I know. Yeah, you do, and it's honestly like you make us all dress up.
Oh, that sucks.
I know.
By the way, when it comes to the should I dress fancy or casual debate, my favorite is John because John really wants to wear ties on the show, and I keep talking him out of it as much as possible. I think ties on our show just doesn't. It's weird.
You should have
You don't see them a lot. You don't see ties.
You should have a rule like at those restaurants. I don't know. You should have the rule like at those restaurants where if you show up in a tie, they cut it off, and then you hang it on the wall. You know what I'm talking about? Like
I don't know where you
saw
can
one in Arizona. Their names are like fancy furs with John Hookers. You know, and it's like no ties here. This is barbecue. And that's where they do it. You've never seen that?
No,
The comments will come in about that.
I haven't saw it. Anyway,
Why do you miss John?
for those
This
of
is
you
a post-game, by the way.
those of you tuning in to the radio version of this show on satellite, Brett Ehrlich joins me and Grace Baldridge joins me, and we have an awesome hour ahead for you. Real quick though, I do want to read a few TYT Lives, two that I really love. One was from Super Last Thing.
Is there no end?
Such a great name.
So good.
So good. Wildfire. I feel you.
Not Jake, but this person has a great tweet. How pissed is that doctor and nurses that worked on him, meaning Representative Scalise, busted their asses and God sweeps up all the credit? Yeah, I mean, look, I caught that as well, and I didn't want to be too critical about the whole religious thing. Because Scalise, talked about praying to God and how God delivered and it was a miracle. Look, religious people, especially in times of desperation or, in pretty devastating moments where you think you might lose your life, faith is what helps them. And so I have no hard feelings toward that whatsoever, even as an atheist. I do wish you would have thanked his doctors, but whatever. Don't you see on Loco says, but government healthcare is bad. They say it all the time. Yeah, it's funny. Like those who get the government healthcare in Congress are always talking about how terrible universal healthcare would be, but they love that government coverage. Anyway, take it away, Grace.
Over to me. So it turns out that the Facebook group United Muslims of America was actually none of those things. In fact, a new report from the Daily Beast has traced it back to the Russian government. The account was just a front to reach American Muslims and their allies. Sources confirm that the imposter account bought Facebook advertisements to reach its target audience. It promoted political rallies aimed at Muslim audiences, and it used the Twitter account Muslims in USA and the Instagram account Muslim Voice to pass along inflammatory memes under the cover of the UMA. The Twitter account has been suspended, and the account on Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, was shuttered at around the same time as the Facebook page. Now, these trolls actually ran this account simultaneously along with other accounts that were spewing Islamophobic messages to right-wing audiences on Facebook, so very busy trolls, and of course this was used to influence the U.S. voting public. The Real UMA is a California-based nonprofit that promotes interfaith dialogue and political participation through its over 30 years old. It's currently non-functional. So that was sort of why some people believed that this Facebook group was credible, because you could look them up online and they had some sort of basis. In fact, they had even had organizational meetings, including Congressman Democrat Andre Carson, who spoke out about this, saying, unfortunately, it appears that the United Muslims of America is one of many organizations that was unfairly targeted by Russia in their attempt to influence the 2016 presidential election. This was a pretty sizable Facebook group as well. The Facebook group accumulated almost 300,000 Facebook followers, and all they did with this was to spew some fake news, which I don't want to perpetuate here, but it was all fake. It was all sort of bullshit. And now the conversation has turned a little bit to who should we be holding responsible? What is Facebook's culpability in this group being able to perpetuate these falsehoods? So 2 weeks ago, it refused to commit to an expanded public explanation, even as legislators investigating Russian interference in the election showed great interest in public testimony. That position eroded further last week when founder Mark Zuckerberg committed to sharing the ads themselves with Congress rather than the descriptions of them they may have thus far provided lawmakers. The executive director of the civil rights group Muslim Advocates says Facebook has a responsibility to be part of the solution, especially when their platform is being used to sow misinformation, hate, and division. It is insufficient for them to notify Congress and walk away. So, there is a lot to break down here. Where do you guys fall in this conversation with Facebook's responsibility?
Well, I want to elaborate a little further on, the sophistication of this page and the trolls behind it, because it's not as easy as finding a page that looks like a little suspicious and then shutting it down. Because what they really did was, the vast majority of posts that they put up there were legitimate posts, right? And they weren't divisive in any way, they weren't suspicious in any way, and that was how this page built its credibility among its followers. And then all of a sudden, when you would least expect it, boom, here is, here's a fake news story that's so outrageous. The U.S. government is funding ISIS. It was an example of that. Specific politicians are working with ISIS. Just things that had absolutely no evidence, no proof whatsoever. But if the page is building credibility among its followers, then, something like that wouldn't seem as suspicious, or at least it wouldn't raise as many red flags as it would if it was just a page that's pushing out all these, nonsense conspiracy theories.
It's terrible what they're doing. It's terrible, but, it's a good job being terrible. At a certain point, you're like, when you watch the Americans, you're like, you guys live a very regular life, except for the part where you're spying for the Russian government. The amount of discipline it takes, the extra work, as you say, to set up all these things that make it seem real. It is textbook spycraft on a digital textbook, essentially. It is all those things where you just make people get lulled into this sense, and it kind of makes you feel bad for, the basic-ass names of all the organizations that happen in America, like the United Muslim Front of people who are nice. And it's crazy that they were able to get the names. The Russian group was able to get it, and then the actual group, United Muslims of America, had to get Facebook.com/United Muslims of America, UMA.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So, these trolls, these Russian trolls, posed as, they were imposters. And, while they were running this page, they were also simultaneously running other pages that would fearmonger about the Muslim community. And so this was all meant to add to the division in the country, and also to lead to a certain level of chaos and misinformation that would make it difficult for the average American who might not follow politics as closely to make an informed decision in the past election.
And even the average American that might follow politics closely, they could do a Google search, and this would pass the smell test. They'd be like, this is a legitimate organization. Why wouldn't this be their Facebook page? Especially when you get to a certain level of followers, I think, as well, most people sort of believe that other people will have done the research. It's like, if 100,000 people are following this page, I bet one of them has looked this up, or a couple of them will look this up, so it's probably credible. And that's how they got to nearly 300,000 followers. That's people that were probably sharing their memes. Memes are very share-worthy and popular on Facebook, and there were a lot of people perpetuating and following through on this false narrative.
Yeah, and I think another potential solution, and I think the solution needs to be comprehensive, meaning that there's a number of different factors to take into consideration. But one thing that I think we need to really consider is the way legitimate journalists do their jobs. And what I mean by that is there are stories that are incredibly complex, nuanced, and not black or white. And the way that the media covers certain stories is not nuanced, does not go into specific details, treats every story as if it's black or white. You know, you're either on one team or the other team. And when you do that, and when you don't break it down with evidence and facts, well, that leads to an uninformed public, right? And the reason why I bring that up is because you need Americans to be as informed as possible. So when they do find themselves confronted with like ridiculous conspiracy theories, they're less prone to believe it. There's a reason why someone as maniacal and crazy as Alex Jones has a fan base, right? Like it blows my mind, but I mean, if you're being fed superficial, lackluster coverage of really complex issues, I think you're just more prone to falling for these crazy conspiracy theories.
There's a temptation to just put a lot of luster on good reporting, and it flies in the face of a tradition of good reporting being quite non-lustrous.
Yeah.
Being very bland, and everyone will say, like, you know what you should watch is 60 Minutes. And you should. You absolutely watch 60 Minutes. It's some of the best investigative reporting. And then there's that school of thought that's like, you should watch Vice. And then Vice is like really shiny, and it's gotten better, believe me.
Yeah.
But I still think too frequently that is taking an idiot and having them interview an asshole, and that's your segment.
Well, yeah.
Like, I think it's tough because we need to get better at investigating stuff, but it is putting a lot of responsibility on the average American to really look at the process by which they verify information. And I don't think it's too much to ask, but really, I mean, the Russians who identified this early developed a strategy to exploit it and did it so successfully. Like, it reminds me of whenever there is a speech after you lose a game and your coach takes you aside and goes, listen, they had a really good game plan, but we also played like crap.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like. I feel like the Russians have a really great game plan with this.
Yes,
I think when you look at the amount that they spend on Facebook ads compared to the overall political spend, it's a small amount. But I think if we're reevaluating where we are as a country in terms of being susceptible to this kind of movement, then we just need to up our game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And this isn't just, a criticism of other news organizations. This is also a moment of self-reflection for someone like me. Brett and I were talking about it earlier, and it's like, what can we do to improve the way we do our job? The way that we report the news, the way we, get the information out there. Do we do these stories justice? Are we detailed enough? These are all things that are constantly, circulating in my mind, because I want to make sure that, we do right by our audience and, future viewers who might come across some of our content. It's so important now more than ever. And, the way, print journalism has devolved is also a little concerning. Three paragraphs on one of the most complex issues and they're done, right? And it's because they're churning out 15 articles a day. And so, look, not to call out Mediaite, I mean, it's just the first publication that comes to mind, but like, they'll do the most superficial coverage of everything. And I'm like, what's the context of this story?
Pop Trigger's the same way. I don't do any research. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, and Pop Trigger's, pop culture, so it's a little bit of a different animal, but...
Yeah, sorry to derail it,
yeah.
But yeah, there's also this dynamic at work where, and this is just my feeling, my read of the land, is that people already know what they want to believe. And all you're looking for is like a stat or a headline, just a little info pellet that you can put into your crappy little BB gun and fire off at people during arguments.
That'll reinforce your preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Which is why, as painful as it is, one thing that I've been more, more open to doing, and I do it every day, is listening to conservative shows and conservative commentators. And I do it because every once in a while, there's a point that someone makes that makes me think, oh, I hadn't considered that. Let me investigate it, right? Because I don't want to be stuck in any type of ideological bubble, and I think we as Americans are more prone to doing that now more than ever. And so just be open to the other side. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. That was a long...
Oh, good talk, I think.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the next story.
So
So, as of now, there is an online petition with about 61,000 signatures, and all of that is to remove a statue of former NFL player Ray Lewis after he knelt at an NFL game. He is a former Baltimore Raven. So here's what's happening. The petition on change.org was started by Eric Monmiodis of Hides. He wrote, "To kneel during the national anthem is disrespectful, regardless of what you are protesting. I will not stand for that kind of disrespect towards our country, especially from a legend such as Ray Lewis." But the plot sort of thickens, because Ray Lewis says, hey, I was kneeling, but I wasn't protesting. This is what he said. He said on Inside the NFL that he went down on both knees to simply honor God in the midst of chaos. Lewis told 105.7, "I'm not in the protesting business." So he's saying that he was praying. He wasn't protesting. That's what was going down. And the plot thickens even further, because according to the Baltimore Sun, extra security has been added near the Lewis statue to prevent anything happening to it. What the hell? What is going on? What the hell is happening? So, this is going to come off as incredibly aggressive, but it must be said. For the military members that are offended by someone simply kneeling during the national anthem, it's like, do you call liberals snowflakes? I'm just asking, right? Because, do we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on the military every year so no one ever offends you or hurts your feelings? And why does it hurt your feeling when someone is practicing their First Amendment right in literally the mildest way imaginable? They don't like it when, people take to the streets to protest. They don't like it when someone's peacefully protesting, kneeling during the national anthem. Can we move on? It's a form of expression that's protected by the Constitution. Now, obviously, this guy who has this petition is a, private citizen. It's not the government taking action against Ray Lewis. But by the way, Ray Lewis, really? You were praying? I mean, sure. Maybe.
Yes, I believe that Ray Lewis would say I was praying. Knowledge of Ray Lewis as a media figure, yes, he absolutely. I was actually praying. He gets really intense.
He's very intense.
Didn't he kill a guy?
Well, I believe
not kill a guy, but maybe kill a guy. Obstruction of justice claimed around 2 murders. That's the thing about Ray.
Pled guilty to an obstruction of justice charge in a case involving 2 murders.
But he said, "I'm sorry," and he found the Lord. I believe, that is Ray Lewis. I found God, and I'm back.
Do you believe that he was actually praying, or was it an excuse to kind of
I believe that Ray Lewis was praying. Yes.
Okay.
But it's not important whether I believe it or not. To get, I think, to your point, But I believe Ray Lewis was I was just there to fix everything because I'm Ray Lewis. As someone who watches football, follows the game, and sees Ray Lewis on the sideline and doing his media appearances, but I just how crazy, part Mobius strip, part MC Escher painting this is all turned into, where it's things just there's the initial protesters and people protesting the protesters, but am I protesting, but I'm not protesting people who are kneeling, I'm rather kneeling to protest people who are upset about protesting.
This is honestly the most ridiculous. Okay, and it's, come on, isn't it kind of interesting that they're fighting to have a statue taken down because they didn't like someone practicing their First Amendment rights?
I don't doubt that is exactly they're just as aware of how ironic that is, and they're using that.
Your government is sending soldiers to preemptive wars and risking their lives, okay? U.S. soldiers, U.S. military members are dying so private contractors can get rich. That is offensive, okay? You want to sign a petition, sign that petition. You care about our soldiers? That's what you should care about, right? Instead, you're twiddling your thumbs and getting petitions out there over Ray Lewis kneeling during an NFL game. Get your priorities straight, okay? I get it, it offends you, and if it offends you, that's fine, but you getting offended is not something that's protected by the Constitution, okay? But one thing that you should do and be concerned about is the fact that our leaders, both Democrats and Republicans, this is not an ideological thing, continuously support war efforts that put our soldiers in harm's way, and they sell you this BS about spreading democracy, but they don't care about democracy. They escalate wars in other countries simply because private contractors stand to make millions of dollars, okay? That is offensive. That's what infuriates me. I actually care about our soldiers. I want to do something to ensure that we're not risking their lives so others can make money off of them. But hey, you know what? We're distracted by the NFL, so let's focus on that.
Yeah, I watched football with someone who just like has canceled their football subscription, and they were at an event where the football was on. It wasn't like they came to like get around this boycott. Like they came because they wanted to be there, but football was on, and it was like I believe that this person is angry at football players because this person loves America. What I can't wrap my mind around is how you can't just go read, one of the original kneelers, the guy who knelt with Colin Kaepernick. You can't just go read his column in the New York Times where he says exactly why he learned he shouldn't be sitting. Instead, he talked to a Green Beret and said, what's the most respectful way I can, essentially present myself at half-mast, the way we put the flag itself at half-mast when there's a national tragedy, because I think there's a national tragedy that needs to have some kind of attention brought to it. And he lays out the entire reason and how he consulted with people and didn't want to be offensive. So at that point, and this was said on SportsCenter by Scott Van Pelt, like, if you're mad at that, if you're mad at the Cowboys who knelt before the national anthem, and this is Scott Van Pelt saying, you just want to be mad.
Yeah.
And that's it. And if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, I'm not mad about something else, then we can have the next part of the conversation. But as more time passes, as we have a longer dialogue, as we see the president re-escalate this thing that was almost a non-issue again.
Yeah. And we're seeing that too from Ray Lewis as well, because he wasn't participating in either side, but yet he becomes a news story because he's sort of pussyfooting around where he wants to land on this issue. And I think you make an excellent point, Brett, that we need to remember why players started kneeling in the first place and how this began. Not the distraction that Donald Trump has turned it out to be on Twitter. And I think more and more we move away from that. And this is an example of that, of Ray Lewis saying, "Oh, I wasn't protesting. I'm not in the protesting business. I was praying." Like, then shut the fuck up. Don't do anything. Pray. You can pray any other time in the game that you want. But during the national anthem, a lot of NFL players are making a stand. So either kneel with them or don't. No one asked you to pray then.
And by the way, we got to go to break. But I really want to get this one last point out. Just the intellectual dishonesty by people on the right when it comes to this issue, right? The same people who claim that they are in favor of free speech, they will fight for free speech, are the same people in their little YouTube shows that talk about, oh, we can't have politics in football. No politics in football. Oh, what happened? I thought that you were, an advocate for free speech. Apparently you don't like this particular type of speech, so you're going to go ahead and condemn it because you don't want politics and entertainment, right? And then also people like Tomi Lahren, I hate bringing her up. She does things for attention. It's clear. But think about the dishonesty of someone like Tomi Lahren, who's been so critical of these players. What did she say when she was on The View and supported reproductive rights? I believe in the Constitution. I'm a constitutionalist. Oh, really? You're a constitutionalist? Then why don't you value the First Amendment, which is exactly what these players are exercising when they kneel during the national anthem? But you don't like that type of speech. So Constitution doesn't matter when it comes to something that questions your ideology or questions your values. So it's frustrating, and it just shows you the hypocrisy on that issue. And by the way, when it comes to free speech, I'm going to go ahead and say that we've been incredibly consistent, okay? Ann Coulter wants to go speak at Berkeley, do you boo? And Ben Shapiro, do you boo? Any person who wants to go speak at Berkeley, as long as you're not inciting violence, which is not protected by the First Amendment, do you. I will support you even if I disagree with your ideology. But they will never turn around and be consistent when it comes to someone on the left or someone with a different ideology practicing their First Amendment right. All right, we got to take a break. Come right back.
postgame here in Studio B, the green screen magic of internet television.
A lot of breaking stories.
Any conversation that starts with marriage is an interesting thing deserves a little bit of.
When the kid cries, perhaps that's the that is an opportunity to do so. It's an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, parenting is you cry, you're gone.
Oh my god. I love that video.
Yeah, Ben, I got a great achoo. You're like, my mouth was open, she sneezed in my eye.
I used to have Donut Tower next to my desk.
Yeah, I'll dress up like a girl.
I sound confident now, Anna. Yeah. When we're off the air, I'm going to be like, how is this going to work?
When you get literally asked why 21 straight times.
Yeah.
And like, at some point, you're fucking with me now, right?
So I dumped the kids off at her mom's, and I drove down to La Jolla for a day. They're like, but Daddy, no.
Why? What do you mean, why? You asked me to look at you. You did it. You brought it up. You know you're doing it. Why?
I don't know why.
I was reading. She's lovely. And here's what's different. Like, it is a different feeling. Everybody says this, but it's 5:11 when we're shooting this. I can't wait to go home. Like that. I can't wait to see her.
What you guys do is allow us to be open and honest, and we don't have to worry about censorship. We don't have to worry about sponsors telling us what we can and can't say. We're accountable by our audience and our audience only, and I absolutely love that. That's the best part about being a member. We love you guys. Hey guys, welcome back to TYT. I have a few TYT Lives for you that I would like to read. So, Music Lover says, loving today's first and second hour cast.
Check mark for me. Check plus for you. Check plus for you.
Thank you.
I want to do, like, I don't know, Justin Bieber stories for the rest of the hour.
I would be fine with that.
Nope.
You got the experts right here.
She's been in his homeland
Oh yeah, I was
of Canada.
I was in Canada.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Haven't we all been to Canada?
By the way, if you guys missed the post game yesterday, you are missing out. Ben and Grace were on, and Grace, we talked about love. We talked about love. Grace revealed some tidbits about her life.
tidbits.
When a
Tidbits,
girl
yes.
finally gets that
Jack
ring, she's going to show it
McAnally?
to
McAnally, sorry. Says, if we're honest, the fake news pages don't really work without a large dose of confirmation bias, which goes to Brett's point. And yeah, we need to all be aware of that. We all suffer from confirmation bias, and we got to get out of our comfort zone and, try to consider the other side, because it might be legitimate, and you don't want to keep regurgitating, half-truths or mistruths, whatever it is. So, anyway, God, our audience is so smart. I know, that was such a good point. Smart. Okay. All right. So I have some exciting news from the world of science. Scientists may have found a way to diagnose chronic traumatic encephalopathy, say that 3 times fast, in athletes while they are still alive. So as of now, you can only make a CTE diagnosis post-mortem. CTE is the degenerative brain disease that afflicts many professional football players and other athletes who sustain repeated blows to the head. Now, there is a breakthrough, potentially. Researchers from Boston University School of Medicine have identified an inflammatory protein circulating in spinal fluid that may reflect the presence of CTE in patients' brains. The telltale protein called CLL11 appears likely to make its way into the bloodstream, where it might readily reveal the presence of a degenerative process akin to premature aging in the brain. Now, the lead researcher is Dr. Anna McGee, who's also a co-author of a study published on Tuesday in the journal PLOS1. She is directing Boston University's Medical School's Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy Center, which recently revealed it found evidence of the degenerative disorder in 110 of 111 professional football players who donated their brains to the program upon their death. So just take in that number, 110 out of 111. This is major. Among other objectives, researchers will need to demonstrate that the protein they've zeroed in on is a reliable sign of CTE, and that it can distinguish CTE from other degenerative brain diseases, and they must understand more precisely how levels of CLL11 that can be measured in the bloodstream reflect those present in the brain. The new study also found that CLL11 levels in the prefrontal brain regions of football players rose as a function of more years spent on the gridiron. In the brains of former pro football players who played longest, levels of the protein were generally higher than levels in the brains of players with fewer years on the field. So we're seeing a pretty strong correlation already, but there's still a lot of research left to be done. This is what she said in her closing remarks. It's looking more and more likely that the tiny vessels that carry oxygen to the brain's farthest recesses become leaky and compromised. So looking for the downstream effects of such leakiness seemed like a promising tell for CTE, but there is still a ways to go. Brett, I know that you are a big football fan.
Yes, that is
so
true.
I was wondering when I was reading this through, if this study proves true, if they are able to confirm this, which it looks like they're on their way to do, what would this mean for the NFL? How do you think the NFL would respond to this sort of scientific data?
So, the NFL has a long legacy of not really responding to scientific data, having there be a long gap between when everyone's kind of like, hey, we should look deeper into this. The long amount of time it took to have the official concussion study revealed versus also to have it actually carried out. I just hope that people aren't just solely waiting for the NFL to take the lead on this. I mean, it just seemed when you see numbers like 110 of 111 former players' brains were affected by it. Now, bear in mind that was not a random sample. That was people who had been playing in the NFL, who had submitted, whose families and whatnot had submitted the brains to be inspected. But there's also a large occurrence within people who were playing in college, kids who played at a much younger age. So all of the arrows seem to be pointing in this direction. Things I think that the NFL can continue to do. I mean, as much as people say that it's ruining the sport, I think making the rules such that you're not getting hit in the head as repeatedly as possible. This year they invented another new helmet.
But isn't that the point of the game? Like, isn't that what they do? They just run into each other with their heads?
They do not. They do not just run into each other.
By the way, I don't watch football at all. So,
I mean, it's gotten difficult at times to watch football. I watched the Stanford UCLA game, I think it was, when there were 3 calls in a row of what's called targeting, where you hit the guy in the head. And when you watch it,
that's just part. That's what I'm saying.
So it's illegal.
Oh,
It's
it is
now illegal. They want you
you don't
to
get points for it.
and no one really understands the rule right now is the problem. Because the natural field, what they tell you to do is hit him low. Don't lead with the crown of your helmet. Pull your head back and hit with your chest so that you're not just hitting each other in the head. However, there seems to be an instinct when you're running down the sidelines. Granted, I'm a fan of football, but never played football, much to my father's disappointment, but not really. Was species. They lower their head right before impact, and it creates these incidents where no one really meant to do it, but it's hard to legislate it on the field.
So why do they lower their head? Is it just habit? Is it instinct? Like,
well, they're changing the rules now, so they have to reteach it for a lot of people. And then also, like, what you would do if you have a helmet. I mean, it's a lot of these guys like brace for impact, and once you start bracing for impact, you make a decision and go a direction. Now, if you go the same direction as the other guy, shit's going down. Like that's the challenge. But cigarettes cause lung cancer. If you get involved to a certain extent, you're opting in. Now, it puts you in a difficult position. Cigarettes are different from football because cigarettes aren't like the one way out of poverty for a lot of people, or the one way to create but it is the one way to create a community for certain people. But at a certain point, this needs to be the kind of common knowledge. As we qualify it, knowing that the official numbers aren't all the way in, but along the way, we make ourselves ready and make our decisions based on the information that we have. And the information that we have seems to imply that football's dangerous, and it's extremely dangerous for former players, or for people who end up having CTE.
Wow, you know a lot about this.
I didn't study any of that going in, and that's the thing about being a football fan is you discover that you have opinions about things.
Probably one of my favorite fun facts about Brett is that he knows a shit ton about football.
Yes. All right. Well, this is a good development in the medical field. So, hopefully they do continue studying it and find a surefire way of identifying and diagnosing CTE while players are still living, because who knows, like, there might be ways to mitigate it that go beyond what can be done during the game, and so that's, I don't know what that would be, but I'm just throwing it out there. The more we know, the better, we can mitigate things. And remember, CTE is known to cause severe mood swings, suicidal thoughts, violent behavior. And so around the time that this CTE story broke, there were a lot of instances of NFL players who were caught up in domestic violence issues. And so, is that playing a role? Of course, that's a possibility. And so mitigating the effects of CTE, preventing CTE is so important, not just for these players, but the people around them as well.
Yeah. So from some encouraging news from the world of science to some discouraging news from the medical field. Wow. There have been a record high number of cases of STDs in the United States, according to the CDC, in 2016. Yikes. In 2016, Americans were infected with more than 2 million new cases of gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia, the highest number of these sexually transmitted diseases ever reported. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Tuesday. The agency's annual sexually transmitted disease surveillance report shows that more than 1.6 million of the new cases were from chlamydia, and then 470,000 were from gonorrhea, and nearly 28,000 cases were for primary and secondary syphilis, the most infectious stages of the disease, according to the CDC. While all of these can be cured by antibiotics, many people go undiagnosed and untreated. Going on from that, I know, it's bleak. It gets worse, Anna, I promise. The CDC estimates there are more than 20 million new cases of STDs in the United States each year, at least half occur in young people ages 15 to 24. So, David Harvey, the executive director of the National Coalition of STD Directors, has said this is very preventable and he knows exactly what's going on. This is what he says. Several factors are fueling the STD epidemic. Funding cutbacks for prevention, education, and healthcare programs, an ongoing debate about sex education for young people, with cutbacks in that arena, particularly from this administration, and the rise of social media dating apps have all contributed to the rise. Another reason that they cite is the lack of symptoms for these diseases and a failure of practitioners to educate their patients on what to look for. There's a lot that is troubling here. I want to get y'all's reaction, but for me, I was very troubled by the fact that there are some practitioners who might not have the time or the resources or to educate their patients on what they need to look for. You go to get healthcare, you expect healthcare.
Right. I mean, yes, that worries me. But I think what's even more important is that young people get the education that they need to prevent this. And so if you focus primarily on abstinence-only education, where you don't allow teachers or particular schools to teach about, birth control or STD prevention, well, then guess what's going to happen? STD rates are going to shoot up. Teen pregnancies will increase. And, my favorite case study that I love to bring up whenever this type of debate happens is, the comparison of Mississippi versus New Hampshire when it comes to teen pregnancies. Teen pregnancies are very high in Mississippi because they only allow abstinence-only sex education, whereas in New Hampshire, which is a state that has one of the lowest rates in teen pregnancy, they only allow comprehensive sex ed, where they say, you should probably avoid having casual sex, and you should probably wait as long as possible, but in case you don't, let us give you the information necessary to protect yourself. Now, that not only prevents unwanted pregnancies, it also prevents the spread of STDs.
Well, and some of these, like syphilis in the 1940s, was considered a disease of the past. So how we have regressed as a nation is very alarming. And I absolutely agree with you. And I think that the way that you combat ignorance and outbreaks like this is through education. And there should be comprehensive sex education in the United States.
Oh, I totally agree. By the way, one other thing, I know that this study didn't mention HPV, but did you guys know that men carry HPV and you can't diagnose it in men? And by the way, it could have some devastating ramifications for men. There have been cases of, penile cancer and throat cancer and stuff like that. So it's like really, really bad when you can't diagnose it ahead of time and treat it. But then also, if you don't diagnose it in men and they're going off having unprotected sex with women, they're spreading it to women, and guess what? You can diagnose it in women, and it could lead to cervical cancer. So it's just, there's a lot of issues with this story, and it's devastating.
Ask your doctor about the HPV vaccine for yourself, for your kids. Way to go, chlamydia. What an underdog story for chlamydia to be in the background. People forgot about it, and now 1.6 million new cases. Hats off to chlamydia. And you know why people get chlamydia? It's because they take their hats off, put a Jimmy hat on it, wear a rubber, don't get chlamydia. Silent killer. Syphilis, I will say, it was eradicated in 1940s, essentially. We moved past it. No, make America great again. Let's get back to the days of syphilis or chlamydia or whichever one that applied to.
Awful. Also,
What's
another
wrong with
thing that they address here that I think is important is reducing the stigma surrounding STDs and having conversations about sexually transmitted diseases and making that more accessible and people more open to engaging and talking about healthcare, even healthcare that might make you feel uncomfortable to talk about. It is so important. We need to erase that.
Did you have STD sex education in school?
Well, you know that I went to school in Belgium.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's in Belgium. We're both in the Valley.
We did. We had our sex ed was very comprehensive at my school, and it was a Christian school, a small Christian school in Waterloo, Belgium. So good for them, because it definitely could have swung the other way. Like a small Christian international school, it could have been run by nuns. It could have been the other way, but it was very comprehensive. Almost too much so. I love Nurse Rollins. I still remember her because we were very familiar with how they have to clean a penis if things go wrong in that way. And
clean a penis?
And now I'm gay, so yeah.
I remember I went to Catholic school and we had sex ed classes, and I remember everyone got we had an assignment where we had to do a report, a poster with facts on each STD, and I remember the one for herpes, which was herpes HSV2, which was a little herpes virus with eyes that said a little conversation bubble, and it went, "I latch onto your genitals, and I never go away." Oh, I remember that. And it scared me away from sex for way longer than cool people get scared away from sex.
That was a little bit of misinformation. Like, that, I mean, herpes can't be cured, but, like, that...
You can never get, it's an incurable disease.
It's an incurable disease, right?
Yeah, you can have a flare-up that disappears. Don't
yeah.
get me wrong, Anna. I know about it.
Anyway, look, this hasn't been
Don't laugh at me. That's a stigma. That's the stigma.
I was laughing at your joke.
Okay,
yeah, I was laughing at your joke.
Funny man.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to mention, this hasn't been investigated, but what I'm curious to see is whether or not the heroin epidemic might play a role in the spread of STDs as well, because sexually transmitted diseases don't necessarily have to be transmitted sexually, right? So who knows? I'd really like to see a study into that as well. So
yeah, if there's a correlation.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for a last story?
Very quickly, yes.
Okay, well, this is pretty quick anyway. Hugh Hefner has passed away. He died on Wednesday at his home in the Playboy Mansion in the Holby Hills area of Los Angeles. He was 91. Here's a little bit about him. Hefner, the man, and Playboy, the brand, were inseparable. Both advertised themselves as emblems of the sexual revolution, an escape from American priggishness and wider social intolerance. Both were derided over the years as vulgar, as adolescent, as exploitative, and finally as anachronistic. Anachronistic. I'll read that back. Both were derided over the years as vulgar, as adolescent, as exploitative, and finally as anachronistic. But Hefner was a stunning success from the moment he emerged in the early 1950s. He will be buried in Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles in a mausoleum drawer he had bought next to Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe really launched the publication of Playboy. He had purchased a nude photo of Marilyn Monroe, and he bought it for $500, and it is now an infamous photo known across the world. So what was your reaction to hearing about the passing of Hugh Hefner?
We talked about this on Pop Trigger, and you were absolutely right when you said it's like the end of an era. Mm-hmm. It's just like, you know, he was, and he would always show up and stuff. He was the cameo king, you know, everything from episodes of Entourage to like Beverly Hills Cop. It was someone who did so many crazy things. There's one quote that I was like, in 1953, this is from the USA Today obituary, in 1953, a time when states could legally ban contraceptives, when the word pregnant was not allowed on I Love Lucy, Hefner published the first issue of Playboy featuring negative issues of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioning I Love Lucy made me realize, you know, they wouldn't even show Lucy and Desi, like, in the same bed together. They were sleeping in separate beds. Like, that's how prudish the country was at that time. And so, for someone like Hugh Hefner to come along and do what he did with Playboy, you know, it was risky, you know, I want to say ballsy, but I don't know if that's the right context. It was just risky, and for me, the most memorable thing was when he talked about having sex with a man to experiment. He said that in an interview, and I thought that was so courageous.
Right.
Because, you know, he doesn't identify as gay, but, you know, when it comes to sexual experimentation, when it comes to women experimenting with same-sex relations, it's, you know, sexy and it's accepted. Men don't get that same type of social support. And for him to come out and say that he experimented and it wasn't really his thing, I thought it was pretty brave. And
Amir brought up a short story that they ran where they switched the prevalence of like homosexuality and heterosexuality, and it was the homosexuals that were stigmatizing the heterosexuals, and that gave people a perspective to see what if the shoe was on the other foot. And for all the talk about the idea that Hugh Hefner led to the objectification of women in culture, which is a good conversation to have, the fact that we have conversations like that is thanks to Playboy, who in a time when you couldn't say pregnant on TV, made it so that we were faced with these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what we talked about in Pop Trigger as well, where he had such an amazing life. He did so much. It doesn't mean that all of it was good, but when someone passes, I think it's okay to celebrate their achievements, and then also have conversations about things that maybe we are critical of, or that we do disagree with, because no one is here saying that Hugh Hefner was a perfect person, but I would hope that when someone passes, you give them that dignity. Just celebrating the good achievements that they have in their life.
Well, there are some that don't get that privilege.
That's a discussion for another day.
That is a discussion for another day. We gotta go, but if you're a member, check out our live members-only post-game, and if you're not a member, just go to tytnetwork.com/join. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We will be back tomorrow. Love you, and good night.
Thank you.